Jamaica Society for the Blind's Tech Tips.
Welcome back to Tech Tips. This week, we will feature a software that is applicable on both phones or computers. But for this week, we will focus on the computer. The software that we speak about is Zoom. Now, what is Zoom? Zoom is a web-based video service that can be used to host virtual meetings with other persons. You have the option of meeting whether via video or by audio or both. This week, we will take a look at the home screen of Zoom, the options and keystrokes. As per usual, we have a guest to take us through the process. And this week's guest is Mr. Gary Kammerer.
What I'm going to do is to enable everyone to hear how JAWS interacts, because I'm going to use JAWS primarily unless others would like to use NVDA.
Meeting controls.
So now we're actually sharing the JAWS audio directly into Zoom itself. So of course, over the past year or so with the influx of COVID-19 and different things like that, and also how things are moving forward from a technology standpoint, we are now in the era where Zoom is the gold standard for meetings, and it's actually the gold standard for education as well. And so what that means is we have to learn how to be productive in this environment. How do we cope with what's going on, not only from a virtual learning standpoint, but from a Zoom standpoint? And so that's kind of what I'm going to do to articulate. What we'll do now is kind of move through the actual meeting controls. I am using the Zoom professional scripts with JAWS. They do run, I think, about 30 or 40 US for those scripts. They are not necessary, but they do help to create a situation where you can have access to more things. So with that being said,
meeting controls to move to an
let's kind of move through the meeting controls.
Currently.
So of course, there's a few things that we want to keep in mind. Those of course are going to be our controls for muting and unmuting ourselves as well as our participants. Let's kind of work our way through it. So of course, to mute and unmute ourselves, we're going to use Alt+A to do that. This is not a key that you have to pass through directly to the application, which means if you're using JAWS or NVDA or Narrator, you can just press that command and it will just work. For Mac users, it's going to be Command+A, and I think that will also work for iOS Bluetooth keyboards as well, if you're on an iPhone or iPad and you are using a Bluetooth keyboard. And so another useful area for us is going to be our participants panel. This shows us how many participants we have, and it also allows us to navigate through those participants and do different things with those participants. So for example, let's access the participants panel, and we do that by pressing Alt+U. This is information that's available at a glance to visual users, but it allows us to actually open up and move into a situation where we can go on ahead and utilize those features. So I'm going to go on ahead and open that participants panel now by pressing Alt+U.
Participants 15.
And as we see, we have 15 participants. So in order to move through those participants, we're going to utilize our tab key.
More options to manage all participants button drop down. Mute all Alt+M button.
And so what you'll see is what the scripts will do is give you actual keystrokes that you can use to mute and unmute all participants, which is going to be Alt+M.
More input search keyword. Gary Kammerer, host, me, screen sharing, computer audio unmuted, video off, recording locally.
And so that gives you the information for me. And let's say I want to mute myself, so I'll tab over.
Mute button.
And I'll press space on that, and
input search. Gary Kam mute button.
No longer here. What we'll do is we'll press
mute button.
Enter on mute.
Unmute my audio with Alt+A or press and hold the space key to temporarily unmute.
So basically what happened with JAWS was it actually told us to press space to temporarily unmute, or to press Alt plus A in order to conduct that particular function.
Input search key.
And so the input search keyword area is if we want to actually get to a specific participant. We don't want to press tab and then arrow through our participants. And so to get through our participants, of course, we utilize our up and down arrow keys, and we can see our participants.
Angel, Gary Kammerer.
So with that being said, how do we close the panel? Well, it's simple. It's a toggle, and so we'll press Alt plus U.
Participants 18, Gary Kammerer.
And that closes the panel. And so we're back to the main meeting controls. Now to open the chat panel, which is of course an area that you're going to use especially as a teacher, or if you're conducting a conference, you will press Alt plus H.
Chat.
That will open the chat panel. So once we get into that chat panel, we'll press tab. Now we can press space on that.
Everyone in meeting to move to an
And then we can press the down arrow so everyone can see.
Input chat text type message here. Edit. Type in text.
And JAWS will automatically put us in the actual text field where we can write something as simple as hello and send that to the actual chat. To close that panel, of course, you use Alt plus H in order to close the chat panel. We don't receive an indication from JAWS that that panel is closed, but we know if we're in the application and we press Alt plus H, we've closed the chat panel. To start video, we would use Alt V, and then of course to stop it, we would press Alt V again. Yes, these are universal keystrokes. They don't just work with JAWS, these are universal. So you can use these with any screen reader application, or even if one is not installed, you can use these keystrokes. These are things that Zoom has implemented into the program to make it more accessible to those who use keyboards or are power users. Sometimes when you're doing screen share, the focus of the screen reader gets a little trippy. It doesn't always work as anticipated when you're doing screen share. So we'll move through these meeting controls.
Start video Alt plus V button. To activate, press spacebar. Video settings button drop down.
Now that's if you want to change the camera that you want to use.
Security button drop down.
Security has a few different options. Some of those will become mandatory at a certain point. We'll press space to explore those a little.
Context menu. To navigate, press up or down arrow. Lock meeting.
You can lock a meeting.
Enable waiting room.
Enable waiting room. Now this essentially puts everybody in a position where you can put them in a room, in a virtual room, and you have to let them in before they can actually enter into the main meeting. I did not enable this just because it's a little inconvenient, because you have to go into the participants panel and admit each participant in order for them to come into the room. I think at a certain point, Zoom is actually going to require that you either use a meeting waiting room or that you enable a password for all of your meetings. So the thing is, as long as the password is embedded into the link, basically as part of the link that you give people, they should not have to enter a password. Keyword should not. So you should always include the password when you set up the meeting. Make sure that you let people know what the password is, or else it's going to be a train wreck. And so you don't want that, especially if you're working in an environment where you're teaching students.
Participants 2, share screen.
Allow participants to share screen. Now, what's interesting is that Zoom actually enables people to share what's actually on their screen. You can have multiple people to do this, and you can basically be able to view what's going on at any given moment on a person's computer screen. I do know that NVDA is working with this as far as their add-on for the remote control, where basically you can take remote control of someone's screen in the Zoom meeting. I'm not sure how great this is, but it is something that they're working on.
Allow participants to chat checked.
Allow participants to chat. That's checked. That means that anyone can chat. I don't have screen share enabled for everyone.
Allow participants to rename themselves checked.
You can rename yourself. So if you're feeling creative, you can rename yourself.
Allow participants to unmute themselves checked.
Unmute themselves, that's checked, of course. And we're navigating all these options by pressing the down arrow. And if we wanted to disable one of these options,
allow participants to rename themselves checked.
Let's say you can't rename yourself. I'm not going to have any aliases, so I'm going to press enter to disable that particular feature. Now,
open security button drop down.
Go back to the security And we'll do that by pressing tab and then shift tab. Press space on that.
Lock meeting. Allow participants to rename themselves.
Now you don't hear that checked anymore because I've disabled it. And so you select these options by pressing enter, which is something that I think should be spoken, at least with the scripts. I think that's something that would be helpful to activate. Press enter. That shouldn't be too much to add. Hint, hint.
Open participants panel.
Now we've worked through the participants panel.
Pause share Alt+D button.
Now this might be helpful to pause share. Alt+T, you would think it would be Alt+P, but in this case, it's not. Alt+P actually pauses a recording in progress. So that's what that does.
Annotate button.
Annotate, I would guess that would mean to actually write in the meeting itself, somewhat separate from the actual chat.
Remote control button.
Remote control is an interesting feature and it's very useful for people who are visual. Basically, you can press space on this. This doesn't have an associated shortcut. And so what you can do, once you start screen share, and that's the key, in order to use remote control, you have to be the person that's sharing the screen. So what you can do is you can press space on it.
Remote control assign A.
You can assign remote control to someone. So it looks like it'll read you the whole list, but you can actually use your up and down arrow keys in order to assign control to someone. So I'll press escape to get out of this.
Remote control button.
And so from a visual standpoint, the person can actually see where you are on the screen. They can use their mouse to take control of where you are, put you where you need to be. They can have access to pretty much all applications on your computer, kind of like TeamViewer. Now, for those of us that are not sighted, those of us that are blind or visually impaired, we cannot use this feature as of yet. As I say, and I say this tentatively, NVDA is actually working on a way that blind people can actually use this feature. I think if they get it right, it could potentially phase out the whole remote add-on. That's something that could happen, but let's not give in too much into speculation.
More button drop down.
Now, what's interesting about these more button drop down features is that they're contextual. So let's press space just to see what we have.
Chat Alt+H.
So when we press space on it, the screen reader doesn't just put us there, so we have to press up and down arrow to figure out where are we.
End Alt+Q.
So we have end,
Chat Alt+H.
Alt+H.
Pause recording Alt+P. Stop recording Alt+R. Meeting info.
Meeting info. So basically, if you want to, it'll put it in a view where you can actually copy the information. It's not a virtual view, but it's a view.
Disable annotation for others. Hide names of annotators. Hide floating meeting controls. Control+Alt+Shift+H.
That's some acrobatics right there.
Share computer sound. Checked. Optimize share for full screen video clip. Unchecked. End Alt+Q.
So we'll press escape.
Dock to bottom button.
Dock to bottom basically means we're going to take the screen share view and we're going to put it in the bottom of the screen so it's out of our way visually. That works for those of us that are visual. Those of us that are not, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't have any effect for us.
Stop share Alt+S button.
Stop share, of course.
Mute. Currently unmuted. Alt+A button. Audio settings button drop down.
And so your audio settings is where you can actually configure what devices you want to use for your audio feed. And so let's explore that a little bit by pressing space. And we're not going to get an indication that we're in it, so we have to press down arrow to see.
Microphone Re-Alt audio unchecked. Audio settings ... Microphone Re-Alt audio unchecked.
Now audio settings ellipsis is actually where it opens a dialog box where we can actually configure things in a more traditional way, but using this quick menu works just as well. So we'll press down arrow.
Microphone Yeti stereo microphone checked.
And so this is the device I'm using. It's checked.
Same as system unchecked. Speakers Yeti stereo microphone checked.
That's what I'm using. So I'm going to press escape to come out of these audio settings.
Start video Alt+V button. Video settings button drop down. Security button drop.
And so we're back to where we began before.
We hope that you have learned a lot from Mr. Gary Kammerer on how to use Zoom. And very soon you'll be hosting your own Zoom meetings. And please remember to leave your comments in the comments section below.
Jamaica Society for the Blind's Tech Tips, empowering the blind and visually impaired through technology.
Want more of these weekly tech tips? Then subscribe to this channel. Leave your comments, like, and share.
This has been a production of the JSB Library.